up everyone, Tyler Medeiros here and welcome to Tyler Medeiros TV. For those of you that are not subscribed, you can subscribe down below so you don't miss a video, and for those of you that are, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a truly amazing story. Now, I want to know whether you guys believe it or not. But before we get into it, I'm someone that truly believes that energy can be attached to an object. Now I want to know if you guys are the same way as well, or what your thoughts about that is. Now today's story touches on exactly that. We talk about some energy that may be attached to some material objects that may cause paranormal activity. Now the story that we're going to be talking about, if you guys have not heard about it before, is Flight 401. Now this story is truly amazing and unbelievable at the same time. I want to know your thoughts and your perspective down below in the comments. But alright guys, let's get into today's video. Today's video is about a flight in 1972, which was an Eastern Airlines flight. This flight is known as Flight 401. Now the crew on Flight 401 were actually a very experienced crew, but the plane would end up crashing into the Miami Everglades. Now it's said that out of the 176 people among the flight, only 75 of them survived, and 101 of them ended up dying in the crash. A couple of people among the ones who have passed was actually the captain of the flight and the engineer of the flight. The captain's name was Robert Loft, aka Bob, and the flight engineer was named Donald Repo, known as Don. It's said that during the flight, the crew actually got preoccupied with something that was going on in the cockpit. The cockpit actually had a malfunctioning happening that was very important to the safety of the plane and for the plane to land. As the flight was approaching Miami, they began to let down the landing gears. Now at this point, the front wheel indicator of the landing gear was not turning on.
It makes a pretty loud grinding noise. If you've flown very much, you're familiar with that sound. So they did that several times. The pilots did that several times, and we weren't alarmed. It's just one of those things that happens sometimes.
Now this can mean a few things. Either the light in the indicator was blown out, or the landing gear did not open, which I'm sure, as you can imagine, is a very important indicator and a very dangerous situation to be in. So Flight 401 reached out to the tower in the Miami airport, letting them know that they had some issues in the cockpit and letting them know that they're gonna circle around and try and figure out the issue so they could land the plane safely and properly.
401, we're right over the airport here and climbing to 2,000 feet. In fact, we've just reached 2,000 feet and we've got to get the green light on our nose gear.
Eastern 401, roger. Turn left heading 360, maintain 2,000, vectors to 9 left final.
Left to 360.
I think it's above the red one.
Yeah, I can't get it from here.
I can't make it pull out either.
We got pressure?
Yes, sir, all systems.
Put the damn thing on autopilot. All right.
Now, while the crew was trying to figure out this issue and fix the issue, they decided to engage the autopilot so they were more able to focus on the problem at hand. Now, the crew in the cockpit actually ended up pulling out the indicator to see if they could find the problem and if there was any fix to it. The engineer, Don, was then asked to go down into the electrical bay and see if the landing gear was out of alignment. Now, it's said that when the pilot asked Don to go down in the electrical bay, he pushed on the steering, unknowingly disengaging the autopilot to an autopilot that wasn't so auto. It was open to you taking control of the wheel. Little did the pilot and crew know that this happening would end up making this plane eventually crash. It's said that when the pilot brushed against the steering, he actually changed the altitude. Now, as Don went down in the electrical bay, the crew in the cockpit was struggling with getting the panel back in. And they became so fixated on this panel and the struggle with the panel that they were unaware of the changes that were made to the plane. It was at 11:40 that the aircraft records actually caught some confusion in the cockpit.
Hey, we did some of the altitude here. What? We're still at 2,000, right? Hey, what's happening here?
By 11:42, the plane can be heard crashing into the Miami Everglades. Rescue workers would rush to the crash site and see if there had been any survivors and would immediately help them out of the swamp. One of the survivors of the crash was actually a woman named Mercy Ruiz. Now, she was actually a flight attendant on Flight 401. Mercy Ruiz would go on to start flying once again, making a statement saying that she was not going to let fear control her. It was only days after the plane crash that the plane would be retrieved, and the more expensive parts would be restored and put into other planes on the Eastern Airlines fleet. Now, what would happen next was the last thing they expected to happen. Once the parts from Flight 401 were placed into other planes, paranormal sightings began to happen across these planes. Now, these paranormal experiences were only happening on a specific plane, a plane called the L-1011 TriStar, which was the same plane that crashed into the Miami Everglades. And it was only the planes that had the parts from Flight 401. Now, I think you can see where this is going and where this story may take a turn. So I want to know what you guys think about this story so far down below in the comments. Now, this is just one of the experiences that were had on this type of flight. One day, a flight crew was in the cockpit of the plane going over the engineering when one of them noticed Dawn sitting with them. In which, at that point, Dawn went on to warn the engineers that there was a faulty electrical circuit, which they were able to discover, then replace before the flight. Now, this is another experience after that one. It's said that Bob was seen by the ground staff doing his pre-flight checks, in which he would then tell them the plane was ready to go. Now, the pilot that was actually scheduled to be flying that exact flight that the experience happened on actually canceled the flight because he was so unnerved from the experience. Now, this is another experience. One day, while the flight team was preparing for a flight, the pilots were doing their checks when they heard a knock from below them. The pilot opened the trap door to see Don, the engineer. But he quickly disappeared with not knowing what he just saw or what to make of it. He went to explore further to try and make sense of it all, which caused the pilot to find an issue that may have caused an issue during the flight. Another experience a flight attendant had among a flight that had a part from 401 is when she opened the overhead compartment, it said that she saw Bob's face looking out at her. Now, this is another experience that happened on a flight that had a 401 part. A flight attendant thought she saw something in the oven door, so she went and called over 2 of her crew workers, and they witnessed what she thought she saw. They were then supposedly warned about a fire. When the flight was returning from its destination, the engine failed and the pilot was forced to shut it down due to the risk of it actually catching fire. On that same flight, it said that they saw an engineer fixing the oven. When the woman was later questioned about her experience and shown a group of photos, she picked out Don, the engineer that was on Flight 401. It's even said that the experiences were happening so often that the vice president of Eastern Airlines actually came in contact with the pilot from Flight 401. As the vice president was getting onto his Eastern Airlines flight, he came across the pilot, in which they started talking, and he thought he was the pilot for this flight. He later then realized that the pilot he had been speaking to was the pilot that died in Flight 401. Now, another experience is that one day a flight attendant upon one of these flights asked the captain to go check on a passenger that was sitting in first class. The person was sitting in a full pilot's uniform and seemed to not be responsive and dazed. Later, when they checked the passenger's log, the pilot that was sitting in that seat was not supposed to be on the plane. The pilot then recognized that the person he saw sitting in first class was actually Bob, the pilot from Flight 401. Now, it's said that these sightings were actually reported in the flight safety log. Now, the CEO of Eastern Airlines would go on to dismiss the claims and warn his crew not to talk about their experiences. Now, that was a change from what the crew was initially told to do. The crew was first told to log all of these sightings into the flight log and record them, and make sure that they were able to be referenced afterwards, in which many experiences were actually logged into the logbook. The logbooks of these experiences would then mysteriously just disappear. Now, at this point, the parts from Flight 401 were actually removed from their fleet in which one of these parts is actually in the Miami History Museum. After these parts were removed from the fleet, the experiences and sightings no longer happened. Now I want to know what you guys think of this story, and if you guys truly believe that energy can be attached to an object and have the same effect as Flight 401. That you could possibly have a paranormal experience with the energy that's involved with that object. I myself truly am a believer. But let me know what you are down below in the comments. But I'm gonna go ahead and close out today's video here. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you did, give it a nice big thumbs up. I truly appreciate it. I wanna thank you guys so much for all the love and support. It truly means the world to me, and I will see you guys in my next video. Peace.